witch. You are the cause of my miscarriages.
My daughter, I don't know what you're talking about. I have only loved and cared for you all.
It is not true. Just leave my house now.
Before the sprawling streets of Lagos swallowed her whole, Mama Nkem was simply a wife. Once, she had a husband who laughed loudly, came home smelling of engine oil, and kissed her forehead every evening before sitting to eat. But God, in his wisdom, called him home too soon, leaving Mama Nkem with a small apartment, a pile of debts, and a 6-year-old boy named Oena, a boy who looked just like his father. So she rose. Every morning, before the sun peeked over Lagos Island rooftops, Mama Nkem was already on her feet. She tied her wrapper tight around her waist, balanced a tray of tomatoes and peppers on her head, and walked 40 minutes to the market. Buses cost money, and money meant pencils, school fees, and a future for Oena. She often skipped meals, smiling to neighbors, "I ate already," when hunger gnawed at her. Her love was quiet. It did not complain. Rain drenched her stall, gossips whispered she couldn't survive, her feet cracked and bled on the concrete, but she stayed. Year after year, she paid Oena's school fees, sold the gold earrings her mother gave her on her wedding day, and never spoke a word of sacrifice. Oena grew, tall, serious, brilliant. And when he came home in a suit, announcing he had been appointed bank manager, Mama Nkem sat on the kitchen floor and wept. Not from sadness, but from the recognition that every early morning, every aching foot, every lonely night had not been wasted. Her son had made it. She had made it. Her name was Adise, and she arrived in Oena's life the way good things sometimes do, quietly, then all at once. She was educated, composed, and beautiful in the particular way of women who grew up loved. Her father owned a printing company in Enugu. Her mother wore real gold. Adise had never known what it meant to go without, and when she smiled, the room changed. Oena brought her home to meet Mama Nkem on a Sunday afternoon. Mama Nkem made her best soup, ofe onugbu with orishirishi, and set the table with the good plates she kept in a box under her bed. She watched this young woman eat, watched the careful way she complimented the food, watched her son's eyes follow Adise wherever she moved. That evening, after Adise had gone, Mama Nkem pulled Oena close and whispered, "She is a fine woman. Take care of her." He did. They married that December. Mama Nkem danced at the wedding until her knees ached. She sang the old songs, the ones her own mother had sung, the ones that called down blessings from the ancestors. She prayed with everything she had that this union would be strong. For a year, life was generous. Oena and Adise settled into their modern apartment in Victoria Island. They called Mama Nkem on Sundays. They visited during festive seasons. Adise would sometimes arrive with a bag of groceries and ask, "Mama, do you need anything?" Mama Nkem needed nothing. She had her son. She had a daughter-in-law who was learning to love her. She had hope. Then the losses began. The first pregnancy ended at 12 weeks. Adise had told almost no one. It was too early, they had agreed, better to wait, to be sure, to let joy grow quietly before sharing it. So when the bleeding started on a Tuesday morning and the hospital confirmed what she already feared, the grief had to be carried alone. Only Oena held her through that night, both of them silent, both of them crushed. The second pregnancy ended at 16 weeks. This time she had allowed herself to hope. She had already bought a tiny pair of yellow socks. The third ended at 9 weeks, and something in Adise broke. It is a particular kind of grief, losing a child before the world ever knew it existed. There is no funeral. There are no condolence visits. People say things like it wasn't meant to be and God has a plan and you are still young. They mean well. But the empty arms do not understand good intentions. the empty arms only understand their own emptiness. Adise stopped sleeping well. She stopped eating with appetite. She became a woman haunted by questions that had no answers. What is wrong with me? Why does my body keep failing? What have I done? These are the questions that make a suffering person vulnerable. These are the questions that certain voices know how to answer. They came with soft voices and sympathetic eyes, a cousin here, a church friend there, an aunt who had always been too interested in other people's troubles. My dear, one of them said, leaning close at a family gathering, 3 times is not natural. 3 times is a sign. Someone does not want you to have children in that family. Look at your mother-in-law. Does she visit often? Does she bring things to your house? Has she ever touched your stomach? Adise, who was educated and sharp, who had read books and studied in the best schools, who should have known better, Adise listened. Because grief makes you desperate. Grief makes you reach for any explanation that turns suffering into a story with a villain, because a villain means there is something to fight, and fighting is better than simply hurting. The whispers became a steady drip, day after day, week after week. And a drip, given enough time, will carve through stone. She began to look at Mom and Kem differently. She began to notice the way the old woman sometimes went quiet during phone calls, began to read darkness into simple silences. She remembered a visit months ago when Mom and Kem had held her hands and prayed. At the time it had felt warm and loving. Now, in the dim light of suspicion, she turned it over in her mind. What exactly had she prayed? What had she whispered? A good woman became a shadow. A mother became a threat. And once you begin to see someone as a threat, kindness looks like cunning, and love looks like a trap. It happened on a Sunday evening when the air between them had grown so thick it was almost solid. They had argued about something small. It always starts with something small, and then the argument grew, the way fires do when they find dry wood. Words came that should not have come. Then Adise stopped, drew a breath, and said the thing she had been carrying for months. Your mother is the reason I keep losing my babies. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Oena had ever heard. He stared at his wife. He looked for madness in her eyes, for fever, for something that would explain what he had just heard. He found only certainty, the cold, settled certainty of a woman who has convinced herself of a truth. Adise. His voice cracked on her name. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself clearly, she said. I will not keep suffering in this house while that woman keeps coming and going as she pleases. Either she stays away, or I leave. Oena did not sleep that night. He lay in the dark and thought of his mother, her cracked feet, her sold earrings, her sunrise mornings at the market. He thought of her voice on the phone every Sunday, always asking, "How is your wife? Is she eating well? Is she resting?" He thought of how she had danced at his wedding. He also thought of his marriage. Of the woman beside him who was breaking apart. Of the home they had built together. Men have broken before, choosing peace over truth. Oena was not the first, and he will not be the last. He called his mother the next morning. He could not even say the whole sentence. He kept stopping, restarting, his voice dropping lower and lower until it was barely a sound. Mama, for now, it is better if you don't come to the house. On the other end of the phone, Mom and Kem was quiet for a long time. Then she said, simply, "Okay, my son. I understand." She did not understand. But she said it anyway, because that is what mothers do. She hung up the phone and sat on the edge of her bed for a very long time, her hands folded in her lap, her lips moving without sound. The baby boy was born healthy and loud on a bright Wednesday morning, and they named him Chinedu, God leads the way. When news reached Mom and Kem through a relative, she wept with joy. She thanked God with her whole body, rocking back and forth on her knees, calling out praises until her neighbors knocked on the wall to ask if she was all right. She was all right. Her grandson had come. Her blood had continued. She went to the market that same afternoon and bought soft baby clothes, a white onesie with tiny ducks, a yellow knit cap, a pair of socks no bigger than her thumb. She wrapped them carefully in a paper bag and took the early bus to Victoria Island the following Saturday. She had not been invited. But surely, she thought, surely the birth of a grandchild rewrites old disagreements. Surely a grandmother's arms are welcome when there is a new baby in the house. She arrived at the apartment building and told the security guard her name. He called upstairs. He waited. Then he came back to her with a face that could not quite hide its discomfort. "Madam says you cannot come up." Mom and Kem stood very still. "I am the baby's grandmother." "Yes, Ma. But Madam says, you should go." She stood there for a moment longer, the paper bag of baby clothes in her hands, looking up at the building as if she might see through the walls to the child inside. Then she turned and walked back to the bus stop. She did not cry until she was home. She never held Chinedu. She never would. Years passed, as years do, indifferent to human heartbreak, constant only in their movement. Chinedu grew up in the apartment on Victoria Island, surrounded by the comfortable certainties of a city childhood. He went to good schools, wore clean uniforms, and had a mother who loved him with a fierce and total devotion. He was clever, kind, and good-looking in the way of men who have never really suffered. He knew his grandmother existed only as an absence. A name that was rarely spoken. A photograph his father kept in a drawer that Chinedu once found as a boy and asked about, and was told, "That is your father's mother," in a tone that closed the subject like a door being shut. He did not know about the baby clothes at the gate. He did not know about the Sunday morning phone call. He did not know that someone had loved him fiercely from a distance his entire life, had prayed for him by name every single night, had kept his photograph, the one someone had sent by chance, in a small frame on her bedside table. He grew up, as children do, accepting the world exactly as it was handed to him. When it was time for him to marry, Adiz was ready. She had waited years for this moment, to guide her son toward the right woman, to ensure that the home he built would be strong and obedient and drama-free. She found Ngozi through a family connection, a quiet, beautiful woman from a good home, educated and pleasant. The wedding was magnificent. Adiz wept happy tears and danced and sang the old songs. She did not hear the echo. Ngozi moved into the house and, at first, everything was gentle. But Adiz loved her son the way she had been built to love, with intensity, with presence, with an opinion about everything. She visited often. She offered advice that was not requested. She rearranged things in the kitchen because this is how Chinedu likes it. She was not a bad woman. She was simply a woman who did not know how to love from a distance. The friction came slowly, then all at once. Ngozi began to pull back. She stopped calling Adiz by the warm name she had used in the early months. She became quiet at family gatherings, her eyes watchful. And then one afternoon, in the kitchen of her own home, she said to her husband in a voice gone cold and tight, "Since I came to this house, strange things have been happening to me." Chinedu looked up. "What do you mean, strange things?" "Your mother," Ngozi said carefully, "does not want us to be happy." The accusation landed like a stone in still water. And then the ripples began. Ngozi told her husband that his mother must stop visiting. That her presence in the house brought chaos. That she, Ngozi, would not remain in a marriage where her peace was constantly disturbed by a woman who could not let go of her son. Chinedu, who had grown up watching his father choose peace, who had never been taught any other way, told his mother, gently but firmly, that she should give them some space. And Adise found herself standing outside a door she knew. She had been on the other side of it before. She had been the one who closed it. The drive home from Chinedu's house took 45 minutes. Adise sat in the back of the car and did not speak. The driver asked twice if she was all right. She did not hear him. She was somewhere else. She was in a hospital corridor 25 years ago, grief-soaked and frightened, listening to a voice that said, "Someone does not want you to have children." She was in her own living room, rage in her chest, telling her husband that his mother should not come back. She was at a window, watching an old woman walk away from her building with a paper bag in her hands, and not feeling anything. Not yet. Now she felt everything. It arrived all at once, the understanding, with the violence of something long overdue. She saw herself in Ngozi's face. She saw Mom and Kem in her own reflection. She saw the years of closed doors and unspoken names and a grandmother who had never held her grandson, and she understood, not as information, but as pain, what she had done. She had taken a broken woman's grief and sharpened it into a weapon. She had aimed it at the one person who had loved Oena without condition or limit. She had called her a witch. She had turned her own child against his mother. She had stolen years, ordinary, precious years, that could not be recovered. And life, patient and without malice, had simply shown her the shape of her own actions. The tears that came were not gentle. They were the kind of tears that have been waiting for years, deep, shaking, inconsolable. The driver, alarmed now, pulled over to the side of the road. "Madam. Madam, are you okay?" She was not okay. She was cracked open. She needed to find Mom and Kem. She needed to kneel at her feet. She needed to say the words she had swallowed for a quarter of a century. She needed to go home. The village was a 6-hour drive from Lagos. Adise made it in 5, telling the driver to go faster each time he slowed. She sat forward in her seat the entire journey, as if her urgency could shorten the distance. She rehearsed what she would say. She rehearsed the apology, the explanation, the plea for forgiveness. She imagined Mom and Kem's face, stern at first, then softening, and she imagined being held, the way she had once dreamed of being held by a mother-in-law who loved her. She arrived at the compound as the afternoon light turned golden. An elderly woman she did not recognize was sitting outside, shelling beans. Adise got out of the car and introduced herself. She asked for Mom and Kem. The woman's hands went still. She looked at Adise for a long moment with eyes that had already done the work of grief and come out the other side. "Kem," she said quietly. "Kem went a long time ago, my daughter. For years now." The beans scattered across the ground, but neither woman moved to pick them up. "She was sick for only a short while," the woman continued, her voice low and even. "At the end she was calling her son's name. And she was praying, she prayed until she had no more breath. For her son. For his wife. For the grandchild she never met. She prayed for all of them." Adise's legs gave way. She did not fall gracefully. She crumpled onto the red earth of that compound, in her good clothes and her city shoes, and she pressed her face into the ground and she screamed. Not loudly, it was too deep for volume. It came from somewhere below sound, from the place in the body where all the things we should have done are stored. The old woman came and sat beside her. She did not say anything. She simply placed one weathered hand on Adise's back and kept it there. After a long time, Adise raised her face. It was ruined with tears and red with dust. She looked around at the compound, the pawpaw tree in the corner, the small shrine of flowers someone had placed by the door, the faded curtains in the window. This was where Mom and Kem had lived and worked and prayed and waited. This was where she had died, still loving them. Some doors, once closed, can never be opened again. And the most devastating grief is not for the people we have lost. It is for the kindness we withheld while they were still here to receive it. Mom and Kem was gone. And with her went the chance for the words that would have healed them both. The village went on around them, chickens crossing the yard, a child calling from somewhere distant, the wind in the trees. Life, indifferent and continuous, asking nothing and offering no comfort. Only the earth beneath Adi's hands, still warm from the afternoon sun, as if it were trying to tell her something. As if it were trying to say, she was here. She was real. She loved you anyway. She loved you anyway. The elders say the tears of a mother do not fall to the ground in vain. They are seeds, planted in soil we cannot see, growing into harvests we do not expect. What we do to others, especially those who gave everything for us, has a way of finding its way back. Not as punishment. Not as curse. Simply as truth.